At 14:23 on the morning of September 19th, 1944, Major Digby Tatham-Warter crouched behind a brick wall at the corner of Amsterdamseweg, watching a German SdKfz 251 half-track grind forward through smoke and gripped the wooden handle of a black umbrella. 31 years old, Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire Light Infantry seconded to the 2nd Parachute Battalion. The half-track weighed 8.6 metric tons. The umbrella weighed 18 ounces. The half-track mounted a MG-42 machine gun firing 1,200 rounds per minute. The umbrella mounted a steel-tipped ferrule. Lieutenant Colonel Frost had asked Tatham-Warter 3 days earlier why he insisted on carrying that ridiculous civilian object into combat. Tatham-Warter had answered that it helped his men identify him at distance when radios failed. Now, 740 British paratroopers held a 400-metre perimeter around the north end of Arnhem Bridge, surrounded by elements of the 9th and 10th Waffen-SS Panzer Divisions. Their wireless set number 22 radios were dead. Ammunition was at 40%. Water was 0. And in the next 72 hours, that umbrella would be thrust through the vision slit of an armoured vehicle used to signal men under mortar fire, and 1 month later coordinate the escape of 130 Allied prisoners of war across the Rhine under German searchlights. Because when technology fails, soldiers improvise. September 17th, 1944, Operation Market Garden. The plan was simple. 10,000 men of the 1st Airborne Division would drop into Holland, seize the bridge at Arnhem, and hold it for 48 hours until 30 Corps armoured columns could link up from the south. The bridge crossed the Niederrhein at coordinates 51 degrees 57 minutes 29 set of north, 5 degrees 54 minute 43 set of east. Steel tied arch construction, 601 metres long, 23.2 metres wide, 3 main spans, finished in August 1944 after the Dutch had destroyed it in 1940 and the Germans rebuilt it. The 2nd Parachute Battalion under Frost had the critical task. A company under Major Tatham-Warter would lead. The drop zone was 13 kilometres west of the bridge near Wolfheze. The entire operation depended on radio coordination. Wireless set number 22, 42 pounds with battery, theoretical range 10 miles, in radio telephony, 20 miles in continuous wave with a 34-foot antenna wire. The problem was, Division HQ would be 15 kilometres from the bridge. The radios had an effective range of 5 to 10 kilometres in field conditions. The plan required communication across distances the equipment could not reliably cover. At 12:40 on September 17th, Pathfinders began landing. At 14:10, 1st Parachute Brigade completed its drop on DZX. At 14:25, Tatham-Warter's radio operator tested the set. Silence. Static. Nothing. Tatham-Warter told the operator to pack it away. They would improvise. Tatham-Warter had anticipated radio failure. North Africa in 1943 had taught him that lesson. Radios broke, batteries died, terrain blocked signals. He had studied the British Light Infantry manual from 1815, the tactics used at Waterloo, and found something useful. Bugle calls. 18 different calls. Advance, halt, rally, withdraw, enemy sighted. Simple, effective, no technology required. He had requisitioned 2 bugles per rifle platoon, 12 bugles total for A Company. 3 weeks of training before Market Garden. The calls carried 800 metres in open terrain, farther than shouting, and did not require line of sight. Frost had been sceptical. Bugles? This was not Waterloo. Urquhart had questioned whether cornets would simply alert the Germans. Tatham-Warter's response had been direct. The Germans already knew where they were. The bugles would let his own men know what to do. He had also found the umbrella in a ruined house near the drop zone. His stated purpose was identification. If the men saw a black umbrella, they would know where he was. If they heard a bugle, they would know what to do. He started carrying it open during the march to the bridge. At 15:10 on September 17th, A Company began the march along Lion Route, the designated approach for 2nd Battalion. The route followed Amsterdamseweg, a main road leading 13 kilometres into Arnhem. Opposition was expected to be light. At 15:45, German snipers opened fire from buildings along the road. The radio was inoperative. Tatham-Warter could not coordinate his 3 platoons by voice transmission. He used the bugle. At 16:20, he sounded, "Enemy left, engage." Platoon number 2, separated by 200 metres and unable to see him, heard the call and moved into position. 8 Germans died, 0 British casualties. Frost observed, the system worked. At 1700, a German MG-42 position blocked the main road. Tatham-Warter diverted through residential backyards using the bugle call "Advance by bounds." Platoons moved house to house. The Germans were defending the street frontage. The British attacked from the rear gardens. Surprise was complete. 30 prisoners. By 2000, A Company reached the bridge. They had captured 150 prisoners during the march and suffered minimal casualties. Frost acknowledged the effectiveness. Perhaps Wellington had known something modern armies had forgotten. Tatham-Warter established a defensive perimeter, 18 buildings in a 400-metre by 300-metre area around the north end of the bridge. 740 men total, including elements of the 1st Parachute Brigade and supporting units. The problem remained. Platoons were isolated in separate buildings, no functioning radios. At 02:30 on September 18th, SS Aufklärungsabteilung 10 launched a night infiltration. German troops moved through the buildings, attempting to break the British perimeter. Tatham-Warter climbed to a rooftop with his umbrella and bugle. At 02:45 he sounded, "Rally, South Building." Platoons converged without exposing themselves in the streets. The counterattack was coordinated by sound. 12 Germans killed, infiltration repelled. Morning brought a different threat. German SdKfz 251 half-tracks attempted to cross the bridge. POW teams engaged at close range. 4 vehicles destroyed, blocking the bridge with burning wreckage. Tatham-Warter coordinated the POW positions with bugle calls. No radio required. The night of September 18th brought tragedy. Major David Wallace, second in command of 2nd Battalion, was killed by a British sentry who failed to identify him in darkness. Wallace had been inspecting positions and encouraging his men when the shot was fired. He was 29 years old. Frost designated Tatham-Warter to assume command of the battalion, while Frost maintained overall command of all forces at the bridge. The defensive population was 740 men. Ammunition was at 40% of initial stocks. Rations were sufficient for 24 hours. Water was 0. The municipal pipes had been destroyed. Men were drinking from vehicle radiators. On the morning of September 19th, German Panzer IVs moved into position and began firing directly into the buildings at close range. Structures started collapsing. Tatham-Warter used bugles to coordinate evacuations between burning buildings. At 14:23 on September 19th, an SdKfz 251 advanced along Amsterdamseweg. The half-track mounted a MG-42 that swept the windows at 1,200 rounds per minute. Platoon number 3 was pinned in a corner building. The POW team had no anti-tank ammunition remaining. The half-track was grinding forward slowly, forcing evacuation. Tatham-Warter observed from a second-story window. The vehicle's frontal armour was 14.5 millimeters thick, invulnerable to rifle fire. The driver's vision slit was 6 centimeters high by 30 centimeters wide, the only vulnerable point. Sergeant Harris asked what he was doing. Tatham-Warter answered that he was testing a Victorian theory about dismounted cavalry. He exited through a side door. The half-track was 15 meters away. The MG-42 was oriented right. Tatham-Warter approached from the left. He walked, did not run. The umbrella was open. 10 meters. 5 meters. The driver saw peripheral movement and began turning his head. Tatham-Warter thrust the steel tip of the umbrella through the vision slit and forced it upward. There was resistance, then blood. The driver screamed. The half-track swerved abruptly and collided with rubble. Tatham-Warter threw a smoke grenade beneath the chassis and created an evacuation corridor. Platoon number 3 evacuated 12 men with 0 casualties. The half-track remained immobilized for 40 minutes. Within 3 hours, every man in A Company knew. Within 6 hours, the entire bridge garrison knew. Tatham-Warter attacked a half-track with an umbrella and blinded the driver. The incident became legend. But there was a second incident that afternoon. Padre Egan, chaplain of 2nd Battalion, was pinned by German mortar fire. Tatham-Warter approached calmly under the barrage with his umbrella open. He said, "Come along, Padre, don't worry, I've got an umbrella." Egan found the situation absurd, but the courage was genuine. He broke from cover and returned to headquarters. Later, on September 19th, German mortars hit Tatham-Warter's temporary headquarters. Multiple shrapnel wounds, concussion. He remained in command after recovering for some hours. The conditions in the perimeter were deteriorating. 14 of 18 buildings were destroyed or burning. Ammunition was below 15%. Over 200 wounded with no medical evacuation. Men continued drinking from radiators. On September 20th, a German mortar struck Brigade HQ. Frost was seriously wounded. Tatham-Warter assumed command of all forces at the bridge. That afternoon, the HQ building caught fire. A temporary ceasefire was arranged to evacuate the wounded. Approximately 200 wounded men, including Frost, surrendered and were taken to St. Elizabeth's Hospital. On the morning of September 21st, the last radio transmission was sent. Out of ammunition, God save the King. Organized resistance collapsed. Tatham-Warter, wounded, attempted to move back toward division lines. He was captured by a German patrol 2 kilometers from the bridge. The bridge had been held for 96 hours. The plan called for 48. The 2nd Battalion suffered 57 killed, 16 evacuated wounded, 452 captured or wounded. The German force opposing them included elements of 2 full Waffen-SS Panzer Divisions. On September 24th, Tatham-Warter was admitted to St. Elizabeth's Hospital under German guard. His shrapnel wounds were treated. He was in a 3rd-floor room. Captain Tony Frank was in the adjacent bed. When the German nurses left to smoke, they had 8 minutes. They tied bedsheets together. 9 meters to the garden below. Both men jumped without hesitation. A Dutch family in the Mariendal district hid Tatham-Warter. He assumed a false identity, posing as a deaf-mute Dutchman to avoid detection. He remained hidden for 1 month. During October, he made contact with the Dutch resistance. He began locating scattered Allied evaders. The total identified was 130 men. 73 paratroopers from Arnhem, 41 RAF pilots shot down, 14 separated infantry soldiers, 2 Russians who had escaped forced labour. All were hidden in attics, basements, barns throughout German-occupied Arnhem. They needed to traverse 15 kilometres of German-held territory to reach the Rhine, then cross 90 metres of river under German searchlights. In October 1944, Tatham-Warter established contact with 30th Corps through the resistance. He sent a message to General Horrocks. 130 evaders in Arnhem. Can you provide boats and covering fire? Horrocks authorized the operation. Tatham-Warter could not use bugles, too loud. He developed a visual signal system using the umbrella. Umbrella raised against moonlight meant advance. Umbrella pointed gave directions. Umbrella lowered meant freeze. He conducted reconnaissance by bicycle, travelling the route in disguise. He identified German patrol patterns every 15 minutes. 3 searchlight positions along the Rhine. The window of opportunity was 12 minutes between patrols. He selected the night of October 22nd to 23rd, new moon from maximum darkness, low tide in the Rhine for reduced current. At 23:30 on October 22nd, 130 men converged at coordinates 51 degrees 57 minutes 12 second north, 5 degrees 48 fitties 36 second east on the south bank of the Rhine, 400 meters from German lines. Tatham-Warter stood at the embarkation point with his black umbrella. At 23:47, the first wave launched. Rubber boats provided by 30th Corps, 90 meters to cross. Tatham-Warter coordinated loading with umbrella signals. 6 boats, 20 men each, waves timed for 12-minute intervals between German patrols. At 00:34 on October 23rd, a German searchlight activated and swept the river. Tatham-Warter lowered the umbrella. The signal was freeze. Rowers stopped movement. The boats drifted silently. The searchlight extinguished after 40 seconds. Tatham-Warter raised the umbrella. Resume. At 01:15, the last wave embarked. Tatham-Warter was in the final boat. 130 men crossed. 0 casualties. 0 German shots fired. On the north bank, 30th Corps was waiting. Tatham-Warter was the first to disembark, still carrying the umbrella. Colonel Doby remarked that the umbrella had crossed the Rhine as well. Tatham-Warter replied that it had crossed more German lines than some tanks. On March 22, 1945, the London Gazette announced Tatham-Warter had been awarded the Distinguished Service Order. The citation read in part, Major Tatham-Warter commanded a company of 2 para-BN which dropped west of Arnhem in Holland on 17th September. The task of the battalion was the vital one of capturing the main Rhine bridge, and this officer handled the leading company with such dash and skill that the bridge was in our hands before dark. Throughout this period, Major Tatham-Warter displayed magnificent qualities of courage, leadership, and the utmost determination. He was to be found invariably at the most threatened point in the defence, where his personal example was an inspiration to all. Operation Pegasus successfully evacuated 130 Allied soldiers plus 8 Dutch civilians. It was one of the largest successful escape operations of World War II. 0 casualties during the crossing. The planning and execution were directed by Tatham-Warter. After the war, the wireless set number 22 was redesigned. Range was increased to over 15 miles in subsequent models. Redundant communication methods, visual and acoustic, were incorporated into airborne training doctrine. Tatham-Warter returned to England in January 1945. He never spoke publicly about the umbrella. He died in 1993, aged 79. The umbrella's whereabouts are unknown. It was not preserved in any museum. It became a symbol of unconventional leadership. Tatham-Warter's umbrella did not defeat 2 SS Panzer Divisions. It did not cross the Rhine alone. But the major who carried it against armoured vehicles was the same major 130 desperate men followed through enemy lines in darkness. Because in war, men do not follow equipment. They follow leaders who adapt when systems fail. If this story moved you, leave a comment saying where you are watching from. These memories deserve to be kept alive.